standing back here, and I just love what you do. Forgive me for saying this, I normally don't go to church. But I've always thought the best churches do what you do so well. You're so giving. You're so community-minded. And God bless you, all of you, Sally, all of you, for what you do. So, originally I was asked to talk about the wellness series that I had taught for many years, dealing with cancer in particular. And today is the final talk on that in that series, and it largely is a summary, actually, of what I have done to a great extent. And when I began my early work with cancer, I actually interned and trained with Dr. Carl Simonton. I don't know if any of you recognize that name in the Simonton Cancer Centers. And what I discovered early on from Dr. Simonton, which really surprised me, and I even went to Carl and said, Carl, you can't say this. But he would actually say that a major factor in the development of cancer is trying to be who you are not. And the cure, and the cure is opening to who you are. Now I promise this has a happy ending, but something that's just fun for me when I talk to maybe say something apparently a little controversial, or to really get your attention. Anyhow, his primary advice was, though, and thank you for your lovely comments and thoughts about joy today, was to make major changes in your life that take you in the direction of greatest joy. And so when you are, if you can imagine, formally trained either as a physician or psychologist or nurse, and what we do, and many come to believe needs to be done for people to be well and stay well, you probably, at least within our professions, wouldn't think joy would be at the top of the list. But I assure you, through all of my work and study, I have only come to believe even more certainly of the truth of that. I would even say, if I were to attempt to define success, it would be, how much joy do you have in your life? And so a very important question for me, and I hope for you, is what makes your heart sing? What brings you the greatest joy and meaning in your life? I honestly believe that having fun is good medicine. I learned early on in working with people in the cancer centers that citing research when it was available didn't always go so well, or wasn't as easily heard and listened to as telling stories. Or I say talking common sense, although I joke in science we don't use common sense. Forgive me, but it's again this idea that you have to be able to support something with really serious, well-done research. But one of the most common sense examples to help you appreciate the value of joy in health is when you're busy doing what you like to do, you tend to forget your aches and pains. Who doesn't know this? It is really true. And so when, as part of your treatment, if you were there for cancer, we were encouraging you to go fishing, that was my way of saying, again, do more of what you really love to do. And just as a little bit of support perhaps for why go fishing, I may have mentioned this before, but where I lived was near Penn State University and State College, Pennsylvania. But my little town was literally called Fisherman's Paradise. I honestly lived in a town called Fisherman's Paradise. And from my deck of my house, you could actually see people fly fishing always. It was the largest, best known, most popular trout stream in Pennsylvania, Spring Creek. And so when I thought about encouraging people to do what they loved, and to also practice guided imagery and imagine themselves happy, it was hard to escape a better image in a way for me than the serenity of watching people fly fish. And so that became kind of a mantra, and doctor's orders go fishing. And honest to goodness, there probably wasn't something more important when I had people, and I would encourage you to list what it is that really brings you joy. I guarantee you trout fishing and deer hunting was on that list. But that made it easier for me in a way to talk to them about why you know that. In fact, if you go out and get a buck, I don't care how bad you're feeling, you're going to feel better for having gotten that buck. But maybe even as important or more important is you're going to be nicer to live with. You're going to be nicer to work with. There is so much reason for why you want to take time to do more of what you love. It will honestly make you happier and healthier. And if you understand how thoughts and feelings are an energy, what feeling or energy would you want to be broadcasting more than one of joy? When I would actually ask people to compare how they actually spend their time with this list of how they would really love to spend their time, can you appreciate that these lists were almost always really different? And so I would go, what's wrong with this picture? But I want to move on now to something beyond what the first part I call interest, identifying your interests. I think it's very important. Although I will comment that it was remarkable how, I don't even want to just say initially, but certainly initially, people found this too selfish and actually couldn't do it. That people were so conditioned with the idea that everyone and everything else comes first, is they really struggled with this. In fact, it created a problem for me with my research when the research from that Penn State did about my wellness program and showed it improved survival with cancer. I couldn't comfortably say it was because you went fishing. Because it was the will to live. You representing these people actually couldn't and didn't do it. So this one though, the next one I'm going to talk about is your needs, identifying what are your needs. What I found was even more of a puzzle for these people, and I propose, having worked with so many people, for many of you as well. What are your needs? And forgive this stereotype, but there was some, I want to say real truth, and I say too much truth, and especially for women. What are your needs? And I'm honest with you, what do you mean, my needs? And I know with my mom, if that's an okay example, was it was just a life of sacrifice, 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 go without, go without, go without. Even when she was much older and had a little money and wanted to go on a nice trip, she called each of us, her children, and asked, is it okay if I go spend some of your inheritance? And I'm glad I can make you laugh from time to time, but I hope you understand this is warped. Anyhow, what are your needs? So I want to give you an example that it may have done before, but I know my wife in particular loves this example, and she's heard me speak hundreds of times. So the way I say it is you either get your needs met appropriately or inappropriately, but you will get them met. So the idea, for example, I tend to use is with if you had a cold or the flu. It is so very common for you to say to yourself or someone to say to you, see, your body's telling you you need rest. Do you understand the clarification here is there, had you rested, you might not have gotten the cold or flu.
Yep.
Okay. You got your need met appropriately or inappropriately, but you got it met. So I really hope you see also then this tie into really why having fun really does make a difference for your health. This is not a selfish act. I would tell you it's downright wisdom. But that's not, again, the way we were brought up, is that it's really okay to make sure you're making time for yourself, I would say daily. But again, more normally it's, idleness is the devil's work and all these other things we come up with that suggest that taking time to play is actually not so wise. Unfortunately, a lot of our childhood is spent, and the way it's conditioned into us, is trying to measure up, trying to fit in, to feel loved and cared for. And unfortunately, in that process, what we learn especially well is how to please others. So, I remember my mom, even much older, saying that's the one thing she regretted most in her life, was always trying to please others. Instead of, again, what is it that brings you great joy? It makes you nicer to live with and work with. And radiate this energy of joy. I made this note. I actually used to struggle with this idea of you can't love someone else till you love yourself first. A candid thing for me. But the logic for me was when, like the idea if you go fishing and you get that trout or you get that buck, you're nicer to live with, is it starts with you first. Is it when you are in your joy that in fact you find yourself more spontaneous, more giving, more loving, and you really will love more, love better, if in fact you will take time to play or focus on yourself. It sounds backwards, doesn't it? It isn't. So what are your needs? Now my research conclusions are that you need it in the end to feel loved and cared for. You need to feel loved and cared for. This is not like, oh, if we get that in our lives, isn't that nice? No, this is necessary. You want a prescription? You know, where this is what you need to do? You need to feel listened to. You need to feel cared for. You need to feel understood. Yeah. Okay, but now here's the deal. You got to do it. You've got to make sure you're taking time to get those needs met. Or what happens? You get your needs met appropriately or inappropriately, but you'll get them met. I remember working with chronic pain and learning that people would honestly, not knowingly, experience chronic pain and limitation as a way to get a need met. Forgive this example, but it's what's coming to my mind. I worked with in a rehab hospital with this one woman in particular who was in a wheelchair, but she actually came to realize that she could get better and get out of that wheelchair. Here's what she said to me. I waited on that son of a bitch for 30 years, and now he's going to wait on me. Forget my language, this was her language. But you get that, don't you? Okay, so I'm telling you, this is real stuff, and it can be unconscious, where you honestly are getting your need met without realizing what need is getting met. Sometimes even just a need for attention. When you get really sick and you're on your own, by yourself, sometimes I honestly believe that you can contribute to the onset and duration of an illness as a way to get your needs for attention met. Okay, how about a need for self-esteem? One of the things I observed, it's another one of those stereotypes, but there's a lot of truth to this, is that for women, the way we're raised in our culture, there was great self-esteem that came from getting married and raising a family. And you felt very good about being the mother, the nurturer. And for men, their greatest sense of self-esteem often came from being the provider for their family or from their work or occupation. But what happens when, for whatever reason, the children leave home, the empty nest syndrome, or for men, if they're unable to work or retire for whatever reason, how do you still feel valued? And I think it is a bigger and more important question than you may have entertained initially, because you have a huge adjustment to make in your life. And I really did observe that, where you would think, oh good, now I've got all this time where I can do other stuff. I mean, every kid, 20 years right out of your life. But now, in my experiences, you did not make that adjustment well normally, because it didn't give you the same kind of, I feel important and valued and needed as when I was mom or dad and so forth. So all the more reason to take really some time and think about what really does matter and how I can still feel good about myself. And it come to mind right away, think about this group and what you do so beautifully, and learning just how important volunteering is, how healthy volunteering is. But I quickly want to add this caveat. There's a fine line, though, between, again, doing for others and making sure you're taking care of yourself. Values. This is the other thing that I think in the end, when I was helping people really understand who they are, what really, really matters, is what is honestly most important in your life. Again, in my experience, fishing and deer hunting were going to be on your list if you were from central Pennsylvania, to be sure. Actually, from a lot of places I would go around the country. It's amazing how popular deer hunting and fishing are. Anyhow, so, along with this, how do you want to spend, or what's important in your life is not only just how do you want to spend the time you have left, which is, I think, a really special question, but do you believe life serves a purpose? This is a big question for me, because it suggests then, if it does, then maybe we ought to be thinking about what that purpose is and doing something about it. Now, in another way, though, if you don't think life serves a purpose, that makes it a little easier because, okay, just you get one time around, go for it, make the best of it. But what I found when people made these long lists, it actually was surprising to find how long your list became as you really thought about your interests and your needs and your values, that there were almost always three, even after you went and prioritized those lists, three things that were at the top. What do you think would have topped those lists? Anything you might have listed under interests, needs, and values?
Being connected with other people.
Okay, being connected with other people. Very good, thanks. Number one?
Being appreciated.
Joy and being appreciated. Those are very, very good ones.
Love.
Love.
Being at peace.
Being at peace.
Personal growth.
Yeah, and what I'm going to tell you, you said, is going to bring you that, but number one, your spiritual beliefs. In the end, for most people, what was most important in their lives and what helped them in determining and planning and living their lives was their spiritual beliefs. Number two, family. But as I'm doing this, I want you to think about, how am I spending my time? If my spiritual beliefs are the most important to me, how much time am I giving them? How much time am I giving my family? Number three, friends. So I would hope you would make your list, and in fact, especially these three, give these some consideration, and how much time you give to them that, at least for most people by far, is what was most important. And then, as I proposed earlier, you need to act. And also, hopefully, you're learning and growing and you change. So I would encourage you to update your list. It isn't just something you sit down and do, okay, here's my list. Hopefully you give it a fair amount of thought for good reason, and are willing also to update it. And I even propose maybe put it somewhere handy where you really can see it, like on the refrigerator door, or in the mirror or something, to remind yourself, as I joke, have you been taking your medicine? Have I been taking my medicine? Okay, and then one last point, feelings. When I was working with Dr. Simonton, I came up with all of these on my own because he had actually broken life down, he said, into 6 different categories that included things like nutrition and exercise, which are very important. I don't want to short that. But because of my training in psychology, I should have understood this better, because I actually didn't teach about this at first. But the importance of honoring your feelings. We've come to believe more or less that some feelings are to be more valued than others. And I'm not going to propose that feeling depressed is something I would have you look for and do more of, versus being happy and having more joy in your life. But one of the things we've learned medically is that suppressing your feelings literally suppresses your immune system. It really, really is important to be yourself. And as part of being human, to honestly express your feelings rather than try to suppress them. I can't tell you how many times in working with women with breast cancer, for example, and they would come to me and tell me I'm depressed. And part of my sense of humor, although this wasn't funny, I'm going, well, what in the hell did you think you were going to feel like? I mean that well. But the idea is you shouldn't be depressed, right? You felt you shouldn't be depressed. Your friends felt you shouldn't be depressed. Your family felt you shouldn't be depressed. Stiff upper lip and all that other stuff, right? No, life stinks. I really said that to my patients after about half a year of working in this rehab hospital and people were trying to recover from strokes. I was so naive initially. The idea is, okay, we know what your problem is, your diagnosis, whatever it is, and then this is what we do to fix you. No. It's not that simple. And so if you have cancer, or stroke, or chronic pain, this is not fun. And don't think it should be fun. You need to honor that. You know, if you really think about this, if you had a best friend who really had some serious problem, whatever it might be, depression or whatever, and even if you didn't know an answer really, what can I do to help? One of the best things you could ask is, what can I do to help? You don't have to know. But you would be there for that friend, wouldn't you? Even if you didn't know what to do, I'm going to be here and I'm going to help you through this no matter what that means, what that takes, right?
Right.
Do it for yourself. How do you think about that? That's right. You need to love yourself as much as any best friend. Take care of yourself. And that's why I love now a better and bigger understanding of mindfulness. Is so often, again, if we're not feeling well, happy, we want to push that away. Rather than, I would encourage you so strongly to sit with those feelings. Honor those feelings. And what's wild, if you've not really practiced mindfulness, is to see and experience how transformative it is, I say, to love yourself. To completely love and accept yourself just the way you are. Feeling depressed or whatever that might be. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, please do this. Please do this for yourself. Okay, and then I'll just wrap this up. So, most importantly, I want to leave you with, go fishing.